Imagine launching an app in the United States and becoming one of the most downloaded shopping platforms almost overnight. Now, imagine doing all of that while losing money on nearly every order. That sounds impossible. Yet that's exactly what happened with Temu. For a while, it looked unstoppable. Millions of Americans were downloading the app. Social media was flooded with Temu hauls. People were buying everything from clothes and electronics to kitchen gadgets for prices that seemed almost unreal. But then, something changed. Downloads started slowing down, growth began weakening, costs exploded, regulators started paying attention, and the strategy that helped Temu rise so quickly suddenly became one of its biggest problems. So what happened? How did one of the fastest-growing shopping platforms in America go from explosive growth to burning billions of dollars? And was Temu ever actually making money in the first place? To understand the answer, we need to understand why Temu became such a phenomenon. For decades, American consumers were trained to expect convenience. Companies like Amazon built massive businesses around fast shipping, reliable products, and predictable service. Temu took a completely different approach. Instead of competing on speed, it competed on price, and not just lower prices. Shockingly low prices. Products that cost $10 elsewhere could sometimes be found for $2 or $3. Accessories sold for less than a cup of coffee. Entire bundles of products appeared cheaper than what most people would spend on lunch. At first, many consumers assumed it was a scam. The prices seemed too good to be true. Yet, orders kept arriving. Millions of customers downloaded the app just to see if it actually worked. And that curiosity became one of Temu's most powerful growth engines. Every successful business finds a way to solve a problem. Temu solved a very specific problem: inflation. During a period when prices were rising across the economy, consumers were becoming increasingly price-sensitive. People still wanted to shop, they just didn't want to spend as much. Temu arrived at exactly the right moment. Instead of asking customers to pay premium prices, it promised incredible bargains. For shoppers feeling pressure from rising costs, the offer was hard to ignore. But low prices alone don't create a business empire. Many companies have tried selling cheap products. Most fail. Temu succeeded because it combined low prices with something even more powerful: attention. The company spent enormous amounts of money getting in front of consumers. Its advertisements appeared everywhere: social media feeds, video platforms, search engines, mobile apps. At one point, it felt impossible to avoid seeing Temu ads. The company wasn't just buying traffic. It was buying awareness, and awareness turned into downloads. Downloads turned into customers, and customers turned into a rapidly growing user base. Within a remarkably short period, Temu became one of the most talked about shopping apps in America. But there was another reason people stayed. The app wasn't designed like a traditional online store. It felt more like a game. Every time users opened the app, they were greeted with discounts, flash sales, countdown timers, bonus offers, and mystery deals. The experience encouraged exploration. Customers weren't simply shopping for something specific, they were hunting for bargains. And that distinction matters. Because when shopping becomes entertainment, people spend more time inside the app. The longer they stay, the greater the chance they'll buy something. This wasn't an accident, it was psychology. Temu understood that consumers love discovering deals. The platform created an environment where every scroll felt like a potential opportunity. That made it surprisingly addictive. People often opened the app with no intention of buying anything. Then, 20 minutes later, they were checking out with a cart full of products. Growth accelerated, downloads exploded, revenue climbed. From the outside, it looked like Temu had discovered a winning formula. But underneath the surface, there was a problem. Actually, there were several. The first issue was quality. When products are sold at extremely low prices, compromises usually exist somewhere in the supply chain. Customers started reporting inconsistent experiences. Some products exceeded expectations, others didn't. Reviews became mixed. While many shoppers were satisfied, others complained about durability, materials, or product accuracy. At first, these complaints didn't seem serious enough to threaten the company's growth. Most customers understood they weren't buying luxury products, they were buying cheap products. Expectations were already lower, but quality concerns weren't the only challenge. The bigger issue was economics. Because the more analysts looked at Temu's business model, the more surprising it became. The company wasn't earning massive profits from its explosive growth. In many cases, it appeared to be losing money. A lot of money. This is where the story becomes fascinating. Most businesses grow because they generate profits. Temu appeared to be growing despite sacrificing profits. The company prioritized market share. Instead of focusing on making money today, it focused on attracting customers. Lots of customers. The idea was simple. Acquire users first. Figure out profits later. It's a strategy that has worked before. Many technology companies spent years prioritizing growth over profitability. But there is a major risk. The longer losses continue, the more expensive growth becomes. And Temu's growth was incredibly expensive. Advertising costs were enormous, promotional discounts were enormous, shipping subsidies were enormous. The company was spending aggressively across nearly every area of the business. As long as growth remained explosive, investors could justify the losses. But eventually, every company faces the same question. When do the profits arrive? For Temu, that question became increasingly difficult to answer. Then came another challenge: regulatory scrutiny. As Temu expanded, governments and regulators started paying closer attention. Questions emerged about product safety. Questions emerged about supply chains. Questions emerged about data privacy. Some consumer organizations raised concerns about products sold through the platform. Others examined whether certain goods complied with local regulations. The more successful Temu became, the more attention it attracted. And attention from regulators is very different from attention from consumers. Consumers drive growth. Regulators create obstacles. Suddenly, Temu wasn't just fighting competitors, it was navigating political and regulatory risks as well. But even those issues weren't the biggest threat. The biggest threat came from something most consumers had never heard of: a trade rule. For years, a key advantage helped Temu keep prices exceptionally low. Many products entered the United States under import rules that reduced costs and simplified the process. Most consumers never thought about it. They simply enjoyed the low prices. But businesses pay attention to these details, because tiny regulatory advantages can create massive competitive advantages, and Temu built a significant part of its model around that advantage. Then the environment started changing. Political tensions between the United States and China intensified. Trade policies became more aggressive. Governments began re-evaluating existing rules. What once looked like a stable foundation suddenly became uncertain. And uncertainty is dangerous for businesses that depend on predictable costs. Because when costs increase unexpectedly, business models can break very quickly. That's exactly what Temu started facing. Changes in trade conditions created new challenges. Importing products became more expensive. Operational complexity increased. Margins came under pressure. And when your entire value proposition revolves around ultra-low prices, rising costs become a serious problem. Temu now faced a difficult decision: absorb the costs and continue losing money, or pass costs to consumers through higher prices. Neither option was attractive. If losses increased, profitability moved even further away. If prices increased, the company's biggest advantage weakened. This created a dilemma. The very thing that made Temu successful was becoming harder to maintain. The effects started appearing across the business. Growth slowed, user momentum weakened, consumer enthusiasm cooled. The platform was still massive, but it no longer felt unstoppable. Investors noticed, Analysts noticed, competitors noticed, and consumers noticed. Because one of the realities of online retail is that loyalty can be fragile. Many shoppers weren't emotionally attached to Temu, they were attached to the prices. If prices rise significantly, behavior changes. Customers start comparing alternatives, they revisit competitors, they spend less frequently. The equation begins shifting. Temu was discovering that acquiring users is one challenge, keeping them is another. Meanwhile, competitors weren't standing still. Amazon continued investing in logistics. Retailers improved their online experiences. Discount chains expanded their offerings. Every company was fighting for the same consumer dollars. Competition intensified precisely when Temu needed breathing room. Instead, pressure kept building. Yet despite all of these challenges, Temu is far from dead. That's an important distinction. Many people see slowing growth and assume collapse. Business rarely works that way. A company can lose momentum without disappearing. A company can face regulatory challenges without failing. A company can burn billions and still survive. The real question is whether it can evolve.
Because the strategy that built Temu may not be the strategy that sustains it. The era of unlimited growth through aggressive spending appears much harder than before. The environment is different, regulations are different, consumer expectations are different, and competitive pressures are different. Temu now faces a transition from growth at all costs to something far more difficult. Sustainable growth that requires stronger economics, better margins, greater customer trust, and a business model capable of surviving even when conditions become less favorable. The irony is remarkable. The same strategy that made Temu one of the fastest-growing shopping platforms in America may have also created many of its biggest vulnerabilities. Ultra-low prices attracted customers, but they also created razor-thin economics. Aggressive expansion fueled growth, but it also fueled massive spending. Rapid success generated attention, but attention attracted scrutiny. For a time, those trade-offs seemed worth it. Growth was overwhelming every concern. Now the balance has changed. Temu remains a giant player in global e-commerce. Millions of consumers still use the platform. Its parent company still possesses significant resources, and its brand remains widely recognized. But the story today is very different from the story that captured headlines during its explosive rise. The question is no longer whether Temu can grow. We already know it can. The question is whether Temu can build a business that thrives without relying on the conditions that made its rise possible. Because history is filled with companies that mastered growth, far fewer mastered survival. And over the next few years, that's the challenge Temu will need to overcome. Not becoming famous, not becoming popular, not becoming the most downloaded app. But proving that beneath all the discounts, promotions, and explosive growth, there is a business strong enough to last.